This week you will be reading The Rock Pile by James Baldwin. This is one of his most famous short stories. So we're going to change pace for a little bit and go from reading some poetry back to reading some short stories. Before we begin, and before you do your reading, I'd like to give you some background information on James Baldwin. He was born in Harlem in 1924. Harlem is a community in New York City, and during the 1920s, it served as a cultural center for African Americans. It was the hub of the Harlem Renaissance, which was an African American literary and artistic movement. And one of the leading writers of that movement was actually one of Baldwin's teachers. He had a gift for writing from a very young age. He was interested in words and how they were put together. But his parents were deeply religious. His father was actually a preacher. And because of this, they did not approve of his interest in literature. So at the age of 14, Baldwin became a preacher, which is what they wanted him to do. However, he was continued to be encouraged by his junior high teacher, Count T. Cullen, who was a famous poet and part of the Harlem Renaissance, to become a writer. So he decided eventually to devote his life to writing. And once he decided to devote his life to writing, it was really, how do I survive as a writer? So for several years, he had to work odd jobs and write in his spare time. At the age of 24, he won a writing fellowship and moved to Europe. And he lived in Paris for 4 years, and he wrote Go Tell It on the Mountain. This book really marked the beginning of a distinguished career for him as a writer. He would go on to write many novels, short stories, essays, and plays. His writing expresses his own experiences as an African American. He, having grown up in Harlem during the Great Depression, he understood the plight of the African American, especially the African American male, and this comes through in much of his writing. His love of reading is what led him to be a writer. He always would read, and even though he was forced from a very young age to really raise his half-brothers and half-sisters, he was always reading. He remarked to one interviewer that he would normally have a baby in one arm and a book in the other, and this is what really made him want to pursue writing as a career. The specific work by Baldwin that you're going to be reading this week is called The Rock Pile. It's a story about a struggling Harlem family. It is set during the Great Depression. The Great Depression hit in the 1930s after the stock market crash in 1929. The largely poor population of Harlem was extremely hurt by the Great Depression, and they plunged even deeper into poverty. However, this was also the time of the Harlem Renaissance, where even though there was such economic hardship for these people, they were rebounding culturally and creating, great art and great music and great writing. This specific book recounts one family's response to a child's seemingly odd act of disobedience. The family members' actions, they have both obvious and underlying causes, and they have both immediate and far-reaching effects. So this is a very good story to begin to look at the causes and effects of our actions.